Let's try to unravel all this with Phyllis Bennis, fellow at Institute of Policy Studies. She joins us now from Washington, D.C. Phyllis, thank you so much for joining us. How much credibility does Donald Trump really have, given that we've had almost identical statements a few weeks ago and nothing's really come about?
We've heard all of this many times before. There's a U.S. proposal. We think there's going to be a solution. Hamas agreed. Well, no, Hamas didn't agree. And then the U.S. tweaks it and Israel says no anyway. This is not any different. When Trump wants to stop this war, he has the power to do so. It's not about we're working on a solution. It's about stopping sending the arms that enable these attacks, that enable this genocide to continue. Israel is insisting that it wants the war to continue. It wants the hostages released, there will be a pause, and then go back to war. This is not something that is going to end the war. When Trump says that he deserves the Nobel Prize, while he continues to send tens of billions of dollars each year in weapons to Israel, enabling this war, last year, the United States paid of our tax money 40% of Israel's entire military budget for the year. This year already it's up to $22 billion, while massive cuts are underway here at home. So this is the priority of the Trump administration. Whatever they talk about, that there will be, we should have, we might have, we will have a resolution, what they're doing on the ground is far more important than those words, and that is continuing to send the arms. Only an arms embargo, an end to the U.S. arms, is certain to end this war. That's the only thing that actually could end it. Hamas, from the beginning, has said that there needs to be an actual end to the war. The hostages could all be released all at once if the war ends. It's not going to work on the notion that the war will continue as soon as the hostages are returned home.
Phyllis, though, after the last few weeks, though, things have changed in the geopolitical landscape. It does seem as though perhaps Donald Trump feels a bit embattled with, of course, the Russians, the Chinese and the Indians all convening together. Then on top of that, we've got a Benjamin Netanyahu, an Israeli prime minister, who is facing isolation abroad and feeling the pressure perhaps internally as well, as people there want this to be over with too.
There's no question that the Israeli people are somewhat divided. There's certainly a great deal of support for the Netanyahu position, but Netanyahu shows no signs of changing his demand that Hamas simply surrender is the only answer that he would accept, and that he is otherwise going to go ahead with what we're seeing today, the devastation again of Gaza City, the destruction one by one by one by one of high-rise buildings, regardless of who's in them. When the latest initiative began several weeks ago, there was a demand for all Palestinians, somewhere around 1.1 million people were thought to be living in the rubble of Gaza City, pitching tents literally on the rubble of what was once their homes. And in that context, people said, we're not leaving again. We're simply not going to go when we know there is no place safe in Gaza. And they know that these buildings are occupied, and they are still exploding them one after another after another. The number of people now buried under the rubble, we don't know the numbers. We've been using the term, the various humanitarian agencies have said somewhere between 10 and 15,000 people have been buried under the rubble. We've been using that same term for most of the last 2 years. It's now clearly higher as these buildings are taken down one after another after another. Just today, we know of 52 people who were killed in Israeli bombings, 32 of them in Gaza City alone. That's bringing the total already up over 64,000 people killed by the Israeli assault, 20,000 of whom, almost a third, are children. And those are only the ones that we know about, where we know a name, an ID number, and an age of each individual person of those 64,000. How many more there are, we don't know. We know of 393 as of today who have died of Israeli-imposed deliberate starvation. 32 today, 140 of those were children. of those that have been killed by hunger. Again, only the ones that we know specific people. Trump wants to end this war, he says, because he wants to continue his campaign for a Nobel Prize. There's clearly no interest here in Palestinian lives. That's not what's at stake for him.
Yeah.
So the question is he going to continue to send the arms?
So the thing is, Phyllis, what would a ceasefire then look like, and what would the road to such a ceasefire actually entail, in your view?
You know, it's very difficult to know. The United Nations General Assembly, almost exactly a year ago next week, passed a powerful resolution under the terms of the Uniting for Peace precedent that called on Israel to carry out a number of actions, all required by the international law set by the International Court of Justice. So among others, they said that the United States must stop providing, and any country must stop providing the weapons, stop providing them in, quote, all cases where there are reasonable grounds to suspect, only suspect, that they may be used in the occupied Palestinian territory, as well as trade and economic sanctions, asset freezes, travel restrictions, ending all settlement activity, evacuating the settlers. Those are the things that are required to have a real solution, if you will, to the immediate crisis. What an immediate ceasefire could look like, it could be what are the various versions that have been proposed at various times that would allow for hostages to be returned, many or most of the Israeli-held Palestinian prisoners, many of whom are being held indefinitely on administrative detention, not charged with any kind of a crime, that they would be released, and the war would end. This is the goal. The notion that the only issue is the 20 Israeli hostages that are still alive and being held, who, of course, should be returned. But the notion that that's all that has to happen, and then Israel can continue the war, is not going to work.
The thing is also, the Hamas is also ready to discuss a committee of non-partisan Palestinians to manage the Strip. Now, how on earth are you going to find non-partisan Palestinians after what's been happening in the last 2 years plus?
Well, there isn't any such thing as nonpartisan anything. What I think Hamas has made clear is that organizationally, they are prepared to turn over governing power. There is no real governing power in Gaza. There has not been since the occupation in '67, and in fact, since the elections in 2006, when Israel put all of Gaza under a siege and began the denial of food, the denial of electricity, of clean water, et cetera, that began in 2007. So there is no real power, but there is a certain kind of administrative operation that Hamas has had since 2006, when they were elected in what the Carter Center called free and fair elections. And since that time, they have been the ones that administer a quasi-government. They have said they'll give that up. They're not trying to hold on to that power. Israel is not interested in who controls afterwards. They simply want Palestinians out. This is about ethnic cleansing. This is about creating conditions that make impossible the survival of the group. That's the language of the Genocide Convention, Article 3, the third of 5 acts of violence that, along with intention, constitute genocide. Israel has been carrying out that genocide by creating the conditions that make it impossible for Palestinians to survive in Gaza. The talk about creating a resort on the Mediterranean that Donald Trump, the real estate agent, has been talking about for a couple of years now, this is all rooted in getting rid of the Palestinians. Many thousands will be killed. Many thousands have been already. Others will be driven out because they can't survive. Their children can't survive.
Phyllis, that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much. Phyllis Bennis there joining us from Washington. She's a fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies.
Thank you.